What's up guys, hope you're having a good day. In this video I'm going to be talking to you about what I think is a really good value bet for this weekend's Europa Conference League final game between Olympiacos and Fiorentina. Now I don't usually make content like this around bets on football, so if you do like this video and you want me to make more content about betting on football, hit the like button below, leave me a comment, and if enough people are interested in this type of stuff, I'll do a lot more. And obviously we've got the Euros, Copa America coming up over the next 2 months in June and July, so I could put out a lot more content for football matches for you guys if you'd like them. Now that won't come at the expense of UFC content. I'll be dropping my breakdown video for the pay-per-view card we've got this weekend between Dustin Poirier, or headlined by Dustin Poirier and Islam Makhachev. I'll be dropping that breakdown video tomorrow. But if you'd like some additional stuff related to football, hit the like button, leave a comment, let me know, and I'll start putting some stuff out. So as you guys know, football betting is a big part of what I do now. So if you'd like to get all my live betting tips for the Euros and Copa America, I'll leave a link to my football betting tips in the description below. You can sign up, join the Telegram group, and then receive notifications whenever I place a live bet on football, because vast majority of my bets are live bets. I don't place pre-game bets too often, but when I do, that's the type of stuff that I can obviously make content about for you guys. So for those of you not familiar with football, this game that I think there's a really good value bet on is taking place this Wednesday, May the 29th, so a couple of days after I upload this video. And yeah, I think it's a really good value bet. So let's get into the reasons why. So the bet that I think is very good value is Fiorentina to lift the trophy, to win the tournament, at odds of around 1.66. So that would be minus 152 for an implied probability of 60%. So there's lots of reasons why I think this is a very good bet, which we'll get into in a moment. But if you're not familiar with football, I know a lot of people watching this video might not be too familiar with football. This bet might actually be a little tricky to find on your betting website, because this bet can be called different things on different websites. So essentially what we're doing is betting on Fiorentina to win this game, even if it were to go to extra time, which is like overtime in the NFL, or penalties. So reason why that is very important is because when most people look to bet football, and tournament football in particular, which is what we're dealing with here, they will look at betting the money line, which is the full-time result, which is a dangerous game to play, because if Fiorentina don't win the game in normal time, which is, you know, the end of 90 minutes, the end of regulation time, like you'd have 4 quarters in the NFL, then the game will go into extra time, 30 minutes of extra time, which is like overtime in the NFL. And then if it's still, the score is still level after, you know, extra time, overtime, then there'll be a penalty shootout. So the mistake I see a lot of people make is if they think Fiorentina is going to win this game, they would just bet Fiorentina money line. But if Fiorentina don't win the game in normal time, and then say they win the game in extra time or penalties, this bet would actually lose. So I know the odds on this are a lot better than the odds on to lift the trophy, but for me this just gives you just a much stronger position for your money, because you haven't got to worry about, you know, the game being tied in normal time, which it could easily be, especially if Olympiacos score first. So I said that this bet might be a little bit difficult to find on your betting site because it might be called different things. So some of the other things it might be called on your betting site would be to lift the trophy, to win the trophy, to win the tournament, to progress, to qualify. It can be all these kind of things. So if you can't find it on your web betting site, you're not too sure, leave a comment below. I'll try and help you figure out where it might be called on your site. But the best way to figure out for yourself would be to just kind of look for a two-way money line type betting market, which sounds similar to this, where the odds on both Fiorentina and Olympiacos are the same, and you can use the odds as a guide, kind of see if you're betting the correct thing. So now let's get into the reasons why I think Fiorentina are a really good bet. So if we look at their implied probability, which is 60%, I think everyone watching this video who knows anything about football can agree that Fiorentina are a significantly stronger team than Olympiacos. They've got much better players. They've got much more quality in every position. And what I also really like about Fiorentina, which is a huge edge they've got over Olympiacos in this game, is that Fiorentina have a stronger overall squad than Olympiacos. So they'll have a really strong bench. So if the game were to go to extra time, when both sets of players start to get tired, towards the end of the game, Fiorentina have just got that extra quality they can bring off the bench to freshen things up and keep the pressure on Olympiacos, whereas Olympiacos don't really have a whole lot of quality on the bench. Once their best players, their starting lineup, start to get tired, they don't have much quality to really bring on and replace them. So this will be the second time that Fiorentina have reached the Europa Conference League final in 2 years. They've reached the final 2 years in a row. They lost last year to West Ham United, but they actually controlled most of that game, played really well. They were a bit unlucky on the night, just got caught on the counter-attack. And the irony of that is that Olympiacos are going to be trying to do exactly the same thing to them. So heading into this game, on Wednesday night, Fiorentina should be at full strength. They played Cagliari 4 days ago, and for the most part, all their players were available. They were all, fit and ready to go at full strength. So there shouldn't be any major injury concerns for Fiorentina. And like we say, they're a significantly better team in terms of quality of player, strength and depth than Olympiacos. So straight away, when you look at the implied probability of 60%, even when you just look at the two sets of players, the fact that Fiorentina are a far better team, I think those odds are quite generous. I thought that Fiorentina would be bigger favourites in this game purely based on that. But if we consider how both teams match up stylistically, I also think this is a favourable game for Fiorentina just because of the way both clubs like to play. So if we talk about Fiorentina, first of all, Fiorentina are quite a unique team because they're a very solid team in the Italian Premier League, but they're not one of the best teams in the Italian Premier League. You can see they finished 8th this season. And yet, despite the fact that they finished 8th, Fiorentina are a team that like to play a very possession-heavy style of football where they like to control the game, which is quite unusual for a team in their position around mid-table. So Fiorentina are a team that like to have a lot of the ball, control the game, put the opponent or the opposition on the back foot, and really not give them very much of the ball, and just keep them penned in their own 18-yard box and put them under a lot of pressure. Now, this style of football is what you'll see from a lot of the top teams in every league. Real Madrid forced to play like this every week, Arsenal, Man City, Inter Milan, AC Milan. These teams are kind of forced to play like this because when you're one of the strongest teams in the league and you're facing weaker opposition, that weaker opposition is likely to just want to sit back, sit deep, try to defend and hit you on the counter. So it's quite unusual for us to see a mid-table team like Fiorentina that has that very possession-heavy style of play. And we can quantify this because if you watch Fiorentina, you will see that very possession-heavy style of football where they like to control the game and dictate the game, dictate where it takes place, play the game in the opposition's half. But if we look at the stats, it'll also back this up, and we'll just run through some stats to kind of show you that. Now, a couple of things to bear in mind before I show you these stats. Well, actually, 3 things to bear in mind. The first thing being goals change games. So there may be some instances in Fiorentina's recent fixtures where they won't be in control of the game because perhaps they're trying to defend the lead and they're handing over possession to the opposition while they look to sit deeper. The second reason why you may not see Fiorentina control the game and have possession of the ball is because they may be the away team, and obviously the impetus to control the game, have the bulk of the possessions always on the home team. So there are a couple of games we'll look at where Fiorentina, haven't had as much of the ball as usual. It's because they're the away team. However, for an away team, they still do have a lot of possession, control a lot of the ball, more so than you'd expect. And then the third thing to bear in mind with Fiorentina is that every club's going to have an off day, every club's going to have a bad day, right? They didn't play particularly well in their last game against Cagliari, even though they won it. And so they're not going to be able to dictate the pace of every game, control where every game takes place, have all that possession in every single game. But the trend for the most part is Fiorentina do dominate the ball. And they've got good players on the ball. They move the ball very quickly. And that can be very, very tiring for the opposition, especially an opposition like Olympiacos, where they don't have tons of quality on the bench. To bring players on in the second half of the game when they'll likely be working very hard out of possession, they'll need some fresh legs. They don't have a lot of quality to bring on. So we just quickly run through the stats. We're going to look at the attack momentum chart. I knew I clicked that by mistake. Let's go back. Okay, so here we go. So this is the attack momentum chart. So you can see, like I said, Fiorentina didn't have a whole lot to play for in this game. It was very likely they were going to qualify for Europe. So not the best example to kick us off with. Fiorentina won the game. The control of the game was quite balanced. Let's move on. This is a better example. Fiorentina at the top, Napoli down the bottom. You can see for the most part they had the bulk of the possession and controlled the game. Second half was more even, but that is because Fiorentina were defending the 2-goal lead. Up until the point where they got the second goal, they were in total control. Fiorentina against Monza. Fiorentina at the top. You can see a lot of possession, controlled the entire game. Fiorentina against Club Brugge. So this one's interesting. So remember I said that away teams are less likely to have a lot of the ball. Well, not in this instance. You can see Fiorentina down the bottom completely controlled the game, had a lot of possession. In their loss to Verona, again the away team, so it's not as clear, but they still had a good amount of the ball. At home to Club Brugge. Club Brugge had a red card around about the 65th minute, but even up until then you can see Fiorentina controlled the game. Against Sassuolo, again Fiorentina controlled the game, a lot of possession. Away to Atalanta. What's interesting is they did control the game early, then faded a bit, and obviously it was all Atalanta after Fiorentina had a red card, but not bad actually up until the red card. Fiorentina doing pretty well at keeping the ball, controlling possession there. We'll just do one more page, see what we've got. So away to Salernitana, a lot of possession, controlled the game. At home to Plitzen, totally dominated the game, loads of possession, controlled the game. At home to Genoa, again had the bulk of the possession, controlled the game. Away to Plitzen, so again this is interesting. Plitzen not going to be an easy place to go. The Czech Republic champions, biggest club in Czech Republic. They've got a few upsets over the years. Difficult, intimidating place to go. Yet they controlled the game, had the bulk of the possession. Away to Juventus, this is super interesting. So Juventus have obviously got the early goal and then looked to defend the lead. But Juventus are one of the biggest clubs in Italy. So to go to Juventus and be the away team and have this much of the ball and control this much of the game, it's quite impressive from Fiorentina this. At home to Atalanta, controlled the game, a lot of possession, took a 1-0 lead, defended it, but even had a good bulk of possession in the second half. At home to AC Milan, who are obviously one of the best teams in Italy. Not as much success here to be fair, but no surprise Milan are a great team. Fiorentina again at home to Maccabi Haifa, dominated the ball, a lot of possession, and then at home to Roma, dictated a lot of the first half, a lot of possession in the first half, but then you can kind of see they've got the early goal and then sat deep in the second half to try and defend that. Roma obviously come out guns blazing in the second half, trying to get back in the game. So again, Roma one of the best teams in Italy, so no surprise to see that a little bit more mixed. So why is all this relevant? It's relevant because in the majority of games we've looked at, Fiorentina had a lot of the ball and they controlled the games for the most part, unless they were playing top opposition like AC Milan or Roma, who are obviously far better football teams than Olympiacos. So why is it interesting that Fiorentina try to play this way, a very possession heavy style of football? Well, it's interesting because Olympiacos are one of the biggest clubs in Greece, and so they on a week-to-week basis also play with a possession-based style. So if we just go through their Super League games, it's not going to be the case against Panathinaikos or AEK Athens or PAOK actually, because these are some of the biggest clubs in Greece. But if we look at some of the smaller clubs they would have played a few weeks ago before we went into the final stage of the season, at home to Lamia, you can see Olympiacos, a lot of possession, controlled the game. Away to Aris, similar, Olympiacos here, a lot of possession, controlled the game. And if we look at, say, in the PAOK, Lamia away, Olympiacos, the away team, a lot of possession, controlled the game. Home to Aris, dominated the game. You get what I'm trying to say, right? So because Olympiacos are one of the best teams in Greece, and remember what I said about, the biggest teams in a league often having to be possession-based teams and work hard to break weaker opposition down who are looking to sit deep and defend. Olympiacos on a weekly basis play in a very similar way to Fiorentina. But you'd expect this from Olympiacos because they're one of the biggest clubs in Greece. They're forced to play like that when they're facing weaker opposition. So with Olympiacos, with the way they play week to week, that's kind of forced upon them just because of the tactics and strategy of their opposition. But what I find interesting about Fiorentina, with them being a mid-table club, is their style of football is a choice. It is a choice because you're not going to get clubs go to Fiorentina and show them as much respect as they would, for example, Inter Milan or AC Milan. Yet whether Fiorentina are playing weaker clubs or the strongest clubs in the league, like we saw with our example with Juventus, a lot of the time they have the bulk of possession, a lot of the ball. So when we look towards Olympiacos, obviously if we're looking at their performances on a week-to-week basis, we know they're not really going to be able to perform like that against the stronger clubs in Europe, and we've seen that in their semi-final and quarter-final performances against Fenerbahce and Aston Villa. They would have had to adjust their tactics and approach the game against both those clubs because Villa and Fenerbahce are significantly better clubs, significantly better teams, particularly Villa, than the majority of teams Olympiacos are going to be playing on a week-to-week basis in the Greek league. So if we look at the games, the semi-final, quarter-final games, they give us clues as to what tactics Olympiacos are going to employ in this final against Fiorentina. So if we look at the second leg of the semi-final against Villa, you can see Villa had the bulk of possession, controlled the game, and Olympiacos counter-attacked and scored 2 goals on the counter-attack, but barely had any of the ball. In the first leg, you can see again Aston Villa up the top here, a lot of possession, controlled the game for the most part, but Olympiacos just kept hitting them on the counter-attack, scoring out of nowhere. And they sat very, very deep against Villa. If we look at the Fenerbahce games then, the second leg, you can see this was in Turkey, and Olympiacos had a player sent off very late, but up until then, Olympiacos tried to do what they did to Villa and sit very, very deep and just kind of look for opportunities to hit Villa on the counter-attack, which worked well for them in the semis, but it didn't really work all that well in Turkey because they gave Fenerbahce all this possession and tried to hit them on the counter, and they weren't successful because they didn't score a goal. Fenerbahce actually won the game 1-0. And then if we look at the first leg against Fenerbahce, Olympiacos were at home, which was obviously a different dynamic, and they had a lot more of the ball in Greece. So when you look at the second leg of Olympiacos against Fenerbahce and the 2 games against Aston Villa, you'd expect them to employ similar sort of tactic against Fiorentina, where they sit deep, camp in their 18-yard box, they allow Fiorentina to have possession, and they look to try and hit them on the counter. Now, they didn't really have very much success with that when they went to Turkey, tried to do that to Fenerbahce. They had a lot of success with that against Aston Villa, scoring 6 goals across the 2 legs. Quite lucky, in my opinion, but at the end of the day, you make your own luck, and Olympiacos certainly did. So what's Olympiacos' approach going to be to this game on Wednesday? Well, what they're probably going to do for the most part, is their back line, their midfield are going to sit very, very, very deep. Extremely deep. Keep it very tight, and they're not going to give Fiorentina much space to work with. Then they're going to play a high front line with their attacking line of Podence, El Kaabi, and Fortounis. So they'll play with El Kaabi, Fortounis, Podence as a very, very high front line. So they'll be sticking like glue to the Fiorentina back line. And what Olympiacos are going to try and do is hope that their midfield and their back line can win the ball back aggressively when Fiorentina are out of position. And then as soon as they gain possession of the ball, they're going to look up and they're going to look to hit the ball over the top to get in behind Fiorentina and counter them. That's exactly what they did to Villa. They had a lot of success with it. They tried that against Fenerbahce. Didn't work oh so well. It worked in Greece. They're the home team, but away at Fenerbahce, they failed to score with this tactic. Can they be effective with this tactic against Fiorentina? Absolutely. 60% of goals are scored on the counter-attack in football. And, it only takes a second to score a goal. The counter-attack could work very, very well for Olympiacos in this game against Fiorentina. But I don't think it's going to be easy to implement this strategy against Fiorentina for a few reasons. So a counter-attacking based approach to football is great. Nothing wrong with it. However, Fiorentina are a little bit different to Aston Villa in the sense that even though if you look at their league positions, Villa and Fiorentina finished in pretty much the same league positions, in terms of the style of play that you see from both Fiorentina and Villa, it's totally different. So neither Fiorentina nor Villa are like the top clubs in their respective leagues, right? Yet we've talked about how every week Fiorentina play with this possession-based style of football, and they like to have a lot of the ball control games, and how a lot of clubs they play in Italy have to sit deep and allow them to have the balls. They're very good at keeping the ball, very good at playing with the ball and create space for themselves in tight areas. But with Villa, you don't really see them play or forced to play like this very often. They may do against the odd club, when they face like a Sheffield Wednesday or a Luton Town down the bottom of the league. But for the most part, on a week-to-week basis, against most clubs in the league, Villa are engaged in really open games of football. They like to play open, kind of Liverpool-style heavy metal football where they like to counter-attack and just have a nice open game, like end-to-end game, right? That's Villa's style. They're very attack-orientated. They've got a lot of pace going forward with Diaby, Ollie Watkins, Leon Bailey. That's basically Villa's style. So when you then get a club like Villa who are forced to have a lot of the ball and deal with an opposition like Olympiacos who are going to sit very deep and look to hit them on the counter, club like Villa are going to be very good in possession of the ball because they've got a lot of creativity. They're a very good team, very good players, right? The problem though with a team like Villa is that they heavily rely on counter-attacking. They heavily rely on getting in behind the opposition back line. So what I mean by that is where you've got your back line, your 4 or 5 defenders of your opposition, and you're able to get the ball over the top of them, and your attackers are able to run onto the ball, get in behind the defensive line, attack the opposition goal. Now Villa are very, very good at this because they've got 3 extremely pacey attackers. Diaby is probably one of the fastest wingers in the league. Leon Bailey can obviously put the afterburners on as well. Ollie Watkins is not exactly slow. So Villa are very, very effective on the attack, on the counter-attack. They're a very dangerous team on the attack because they're very good at getting in behind you when defences are out of shape or you're giving them space. The problem for a club like Villa when they face someone like Olympiacos is when Olympiacos sit very deep, which means they sit very, very, or they set themselves out strategically very close to their goal. There's no space between the defensive backline and the goal for a team like Villa's pacey wingers or strikers to get in behind the backline, get in behind, which is where Villa are at their absolute best. We saw them getting behind Liverpool probably double-digit times, in one of their last games of the season when they looked extremely dangerous, scored 3 goals, and it could have been more. So the reason why clubs like Olympiacos can pose a threat to clubs like Villa is that they're not used to playing in the way that Olympiacos kind of forced them to play. Now, the main reason why the counter-attack strategy is so effective in football is because when you press forward and you're high up the pitch and you've got possession of the ball and you're trying to break your opponent down or your opposition down, track me. Thank you. Camera malfunctioned a little bit. So when you've got possession of the ball, you're trying to break the opposition down. You are in a position on the pitch where your defense isn't set out in the most organized way because you've got a lot of space in behind you, right? So if you think about it, oh man, I need one of those like things where you can draw. But basically, if you think about Olympiacos' approach to this game, the majority of their players are going to be in their own half, in and around their 18-yard box, trying to take the space away from Fiorentina and keep it really, really tight. Which means Fiorentina players are going to push right up the pitch, and for the most part, majority of them are going to be in Olympiacos' half, close to the 18-yard box. This was the exact same dynamic we saw in the second leg of the Fenerbahce game, and also both legs of the Villa game. Now, this is great for the team in possession of the ball because they're really close to the opposition goal, which means they can create a lot of goal-scoring opportunities. But it also makes them vulnerable because remember what we were saying about the reason why Villa struggled against Olympiacos was because Olympiacos sat so deep there wasn't much space between the Olympiacos defensive line and the goal. That means there's not much space to get in behind with your pacey wingers, your pacey strikers, and a tackle from in behind the defensive line. But when you have a lot of the ball and you push on and you're playing in your opposition half, there's obviously a lot of space in behind your back line for your opposition's pacey winger strikers to run onto, and then there's no defenders in between them and the goal. And that's what happened in the Villa game. Olympiacos kept countering them, so they can do this to Fiorentina. There's no doubt about that. And what you're gonna see is you'll see, like I say, the Olympiacos midfield and defence camped in their own 18-yard box. You'll have a bit of a gap, and then you'll see the Olympiacos front line play a very, very high line. You may have one of them drop off to look to win the ball in like an attacking midfield positions, and they can be an outlet for the defensive midfielders, the defence that are going to be under a lot of pressure. But what they'll be looking is to pick up the ball. Whoever wins the ball will pick up the ball, look up, and the Olympiacos front line will be looking to run in and get behind the Fiorentina back line. And that could work really well. It could work really well. It worked for them against Villa. It worked for them against Fenerbahce. But what's really interesting to me is how when Olympiacos tried to do this to Fenerbahce, at Fenerbahce, it was totally ineffective. Right? If we bring that game up, this one here, I remember the red card for Olympiacos came in like the 90th minute, and up until that point they got dominated. So what's interesting about this game is that Olympiacos tried to use this strategy against Fenerbahce, where they let Fenerbahce have all the ball, and then they look for opportunities to hit them on the counter. Now, this worked very well against Villa because they scored 6 goals over 2 legs against them. Didn't work against Fenerbahce. They didn't score a goal in the entire game. Why could that be? Well, what do we know about Fenerbahce? So Fenerbahce are one of the biggest clubs in Turkey. think they just finished second or third in the Turkish Super League. Galatasaray won the league, but Fenerbahce was second or third. In fact, we might be able to see if we scroll up. No, we're on Olympiakos' page. We're not on Fenerbahce's page. So yeah, they finished second or third. Either way, Fenerbahce, one of the best clubs in Turkey. So this is interesting to me because remember what we were saying about the best clubs in every European league having to deal with opposition who sit very deep against them and defend. So Fenerbahce are dealing with teams like Olympiakos every single week who defend hard against them, and they won't come out and play. They won't come out and have a game of football. They'll hide in their 18-yard box. But Fenerbahce deal with this style every week because they're one of the biggest clubs in Turkey, and this is what every club in Turkey, aside from the other top ones like Galatasaray, that's what they try and do to Fenerbahce. So what's interesting to me about this is Fenerbahce are a club that deal with the style of play that Olympiakos are going to employ every single week. And because Fenerbahce are used to that style of football, Olympiakos didn't score a single goal. They then play Villa over 2 legs. They score 6 goals over 2 legs. And I think a big part of that is because Villa are not used to playing with the style that Olympiakos play with very often. Yes, they have to deal with it every once in a while in Europe. Yes, they have to deal with it every once in a while when they're facing a very weak club in the division like a Sheffield United. But for the most part, Villa don't play like that on a week-to-week basis. Fenerbahce do. Fenerbahce were able to deal with the counter-attack threat of Olympiakos and stop them scoring. Why is this interesting? It's interesting to me because Fiorentina, for the most part, play with this very possession-heavy, controlled style of football every week as well, out of choice, not a necessity, like we get with a club like Fenerbahce. Why is this important? This is important because one of the reasons why a counter-attacking style of play in football is so effective is because when you are obviously pushing on in possession and there's a lot of space behind you, you're also moving around, your players are moving around the pitch in different formations, different triangles, different overlaps, different overloads to try and find space in usually what is a very congested half or a very congested 18-yard box. This means that when you're in possession of the ball, players are often out of position, as like I said, they try and create overloads or they try and move to receive the ball, triangles, they try to make runs or passes, things like that. So when you lose possession of the ball and your opposition's looking to counter, quite often some of your players are out of position, which gives the opposition space to move into. Now, when you play with, or when you deal with teams that try to play very deep against you on a weekly basis, like when you're Fenerbahce, like when you're Fiorentina, like when you're Real Madrid or you're a Manchester City, you are always going to be vulnerable to the counter-attack. We saw Man United win the FA Cup against Man City this past weekend with counter-attacking or counter-attacking based strategies. It's very, very, very effective. 60% of goals in football are scored on the counter-attack. It works extremely well. However, it's much harder to use against a club like Fiorentina that deal with this style of football every single week. And why is it? Because they're ready for it, they're prepared for it, they know what to expect. So, for example, say a club like Aston Villa, who don't deal with this style of football very often, go up against a club like Olympiakos, who are sitting deep in their 18-yard box. Well, their left and right backs are going to be looking to help the wingers with the overload, to play out wide and get the ball in the box. The midfielders are going to be trying to beat people in midfield or, play really cutting passes, to split the defence. And whenever they play those passes, they can either get caught out of position as they advance forward or lose possession of the ball. And so for a club like Villa, who aren't used to dealing with this style very often, the players don't have that natural synergy or experience to cover one another or identify potential risky areas on the pitch where they could be vulnerable when their teammates get caught in possession of the ball, give the ball away, get caught out of position. Whereas a team like Fiorentina or a Man City or a Real Madrid, they're going to get caught on the counter as well. There's no way to get around that. But all the players are much more experienced at dealing with opposition like that. Therefore, they're more likely to cover for one another, take that space away, and be a lot more organised when they're dealing with teams like Olympiacos, who play a high line, who are going to look to hit them on the counter. They're just much better prepared for it. So when I'm looking at this game, implied probability of 60% on Fiorentina to win this tournament, I really like it because they've got the stronger squad, the better squad, they're the better team. And we've seen Olympiacos struggle against Fenerbahce to use these tactics. And Fiorentina are a far better team than Fenerbahce. They've got a lot of strength in depth. They can bring quality off the bench to cause Olympiacos problems late in the game. I just think there's a lot of reasons to like. I just think there's a lot of reasons to like Olympiacos in this game. I think when you look at how good Fiorentina are in possession, how relentless they are, how much quality they've got all over the pitch, I just think that Olympiacos will get opportunities to counter them, and they may score. You know, there's nothing you can do about it. But the fatal flaw in the counter attacking strategy is that you rely on the opposition to give you enough opportunities to counter them, right? In the sense that you're not going to have a whole lot of the ball. So when you do get it, you need to make it count. And that's not always an easy thing to do against a well-organised team like Fiorentina. So look, it only takes a second to score a goal. Perhaps Olympiacos' counter-attacking based strategy will work and they will win the Europa Conference League trophy on Wednesday night. But when we add everything up, we look at the big picture, I do think that Fiorentina to win the trophy at 1.66 minus 152 for an implied probability of 60%. I think that's a really good bet, and so I'll be betting it this week, and hopefully they come through for us. So if you like this video, please hit the like button below. We can do more videos like this about some football matches coming up in the Euros or Copa America in June and July, which could be pretty good for betting. Leave a comment as well if you'd like me to do more of this sort of stuff. Let me know how you feel about it. The UFC 301, what number are we on now? UFC 302. UFC 302 video coming tomorrow. Have a great night. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. I'll see you all very soon. Nice one, guys. Bye.